Marcus stared at the bill, $347.82, and felt his stomach drop in a way that had nothing to do with the ribeye he'd just eaten. Across from him, Vanessa was reapplying lipstick with the casual confidence of someone who hadn't just ordered half the menu, 3 cocktails, and an appetizer for the table that only she touched. "So," she said, snapping her compact shut, "this was fun." Fun. The word hung in the air like the question neither of them had addressed yet. Marcus reached for his wallet, trying to keep his face neutral. He'd expected to pay. That wasn't the issue. He'd suggested this place, after all. But something about the way she'd ordered, the way she'd waved away his gentle, "Are you sure?" when she added the lobster tail to her steak, had triggered an alarm he couldn't quite name. "Actually," she said, her hand flying to her designer purse with theatrical surprise. "Oh my God, Marcus, I'm so embarrassed." He looked up. Her face had arranged itself into apologetic concern, but her eyes were doing something else entirely, scanning his reaction with the precision of a card sharp reading a mark. "I completely forgot my wallet. Can you believe it? I literally grabbed the wrong bag when I left the office." She laughed, light and airy. "I'm such a disaster sometimes." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Not anger, not yet. Something colder. Recognition. He'd heard this story before, not from her, but from his buddy Jake, who'd gone on 3 dates last month with women who'd all mysteriously forgotten their wallets. From his sister, who'd watched her friend pull this move so many times that it had become a running joke in their group chat. He laughed then, thinking it was urban legend shit, the kind of story men told each other to feel superior. Except here it was, happening to him. "No worries," he heard himself say, and watched her face relax into a smile that made his skin crawl. 2 weeks earlier, Marcus had been ready to delete every dating app on his phone. 29, mechanical engineer, mortgage on a decent condo in the city. Objectively, his life was in good shape, but the dating scene felt like a second job he was failing at. Endless swiping, conversations that died after 3 messages, first dates that felt like bad auditions for a role neither person wanted. Then Vanessa's profile appeared. 26, marketing executive, photos that somehow managed to be both stunning and approachable. Her bio was simple: looking for someone who can keep up with me intellectually and isn't threatened by a woman who knows what she wants. Their first message exchange had lasted 3 hours. She was sharp, funny, asked questions about his work that showed she'd actually read his profile. When he mentioned his amateur photography hobby, she'd sent him a link to a gallery showing she thought he'd appreciate. Most women just sent back a thumbs-up emoji. "Drinks this week?" he'd typed, feeling that rare flutter of actual interest. "I don't really do drinks," she'd replied. "Too many guys use it as an excuse for a cheap date. If you're serious about getting to know someone, don't you think dinner makes more sense?" He'd paused at that. It felt presumptuous, but also kind of refreshing. At least she was direct about her expectations. "Fair enough," he'd written back. "I know a great Italian place downtown. Thursday at 7? "Perfect. But actually, I've been dying to try merchant and trade. Have you been?" He had. Once, for his parents' anniversary, the kind of place where appetizers started at $30, and the sommelier could describe the terroir of every wine like he was reciting poetry. "It's pretty upscale," he'd typed carefully. "Want to maybe start somewhere more casual?" "Oh God, are you one of those guys who's weird about money? I can pay my half, Marcus. I just like nice things." And there it was, the trap he hadn't seen coming. The implication that being practical about a first date meant he was cheap, insecure, or worse. He'd felt his defenses rising, that male ego bullshit that made you want to prove you could afford whatever she wanted. "Not at all," he'd replied. "Merchant and trade it is. Thursday at 7. "Can't wait," she'd written, followed by a kiss emoji that made him feel like he'd passed some kind of test. He should have known then. should have recognized the pattern, but he was lonely and she was beautiful, and he'd convinced himself that maybe she was just the kind of woman who knew her worth and didn't settle for less. Thursday arrived with that specific anxiety that comes with first dates at expensive restaurants. Marcus had dressed carefully. Button down, dark jeans, the watch his grandfather had left him, not trying too hard, but showing he'd made an effort. He'd arrived 5 minutes early, waiting at the bar with a club soda because he wanted to stay sharp. The place was exactly as he remembered. Low lighting, exposed brick, the kind of calculated industrial chic that cost a fortune to look effortless. Vanessa walked in 20 minutes late. She was stunning. That was the thing that made everything complicated. Black dress that hugged every curve, heels that brought her almost to his height, and hair and makeup that suggested she'd spent at least an hour getting ready. Every guy in the restaurant tracked her movement across the room. "Sorry," she said, kissing his cheek like they'd known each other for years. "Work thing ran late. You know how it is." She smelled expensive. Perfume that probably cost more than his monthly car payment. "No problem," he said, and meant it. She was here. She looked incredible. Maybe this would be worth it. The hostess seated them at a corner table with good lighting. Vanessa had requested it when Marcus made the reservation, for the ambiance. As soon as they sat down, she picked up the menu with the focus of someone studying a contract. "Oh my God, they have the Tasmanian trout. I've been wanting to try that forever." Marcus glanced at the price. $58. "The steaks look good too," he offered, hoping to steer towards something more reasonable. "I'm not really a steak person," she said, not looking up. "Oh, and we should definitely start with the charcuterie board, and maybe the burrata? I can't decide." "Why don't we just pick one?" Marcus suggested. She looked at him over the menu, and there was that look again, the one that said he was being cheap, being difficult, being the kind of guy who couldn't handle a woman with expensive tastes. "Or we could get both," he added quickly, hating himself a little. "Perfect," she said, smiling. "You're so easygoing. I love that about you." The waiter appeared, and Vanessa ordered like she was hosting a dinner party for 6. The charcuterie board, the burrata, a Caesar salad to share, though she noticed she said it in a way that suggested she'd be doing most of the sharing with herself. The Tasmanian trout, prepared with a special sauce that cost an additional $12, and a glass of the Italian white that the waiter recommended, which turned out to be $24. Marcus ordered a ribeye and a beer, feeling like he was failing some test he hadn't studied for. "So tell me about your work," Vanessa said, once the waiter left, leaning forward in a way that suggested genuine interest. And here's the thing, the conversation was good, really good. She asked smart questions about his projects, laughed at his stories about office politics, shared her own experiences in marketing that made her sound ambitious and driven. She was engaging, present, the kind of person that made you feel like you were the only one in the room. The appetizers arrived, and she attacked them with enthusiasm, pushing the burrata toward him. "You have to try this with the balsamic reduction. It's incredible." He tried it. It was incredible. Maybe he'd been too quick to judge. Maybe she just appreciated quality, knew how to enjoy life. Was that really such a bad thing? Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, frowned, then smiled apologetically. "Sorry, work. Do you mind if I just—" "Go ahead." She typed quickly, her expression shifting from professional to annoyed to neutral in the span of 30 seconds. Crisis averted. "My assistant is amazing, but sometimes she needs a little guidance, you know?" Marcus nodded, though something about the way she said assistant rubbed him wrong, like it was a flex, proof of her status. The entrees arrived. Vanessa's trout looked like art on a plate, perfectly arranged with microgreens and some kind of foam Marcus couldn't identify. His steak was simpler but substantial, the kind of meal that made the price tag feel almost justified. "How's yours?" he asked. "Unbelievable," she said, closing her eyes in exaggerated pleasure. "Here, try a bite." She offered her fork across the table, and Marcus took it, tasting the delicate fish with its complex sauce. It was good. Really good. But was it $58 good? He wasn't sure anymore. "So," Vanessa said, setting down her fork and reaching for her wine glass, "tell me about your last relationship." It was the question Marcus had been dreading, not because the answer was complicated, but because it revealed exactly how long he'd been failing at this. Ended about a year ago. We'd been together for 3 years. She wanted different things. Like what? She wanted to move back to her hometown. I had just gotten promoted. We couldn't make the geography work. Vanessa nodded, her expression sympathetic, but also appraising. That's tough, but honestly, if someone really wants to be with you, they make it work. Distance is just an excuse. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. It wasn't just distance. It was career, family, timing. "I'm just saying," Vanessa interrupted, taking another sip of wine. "When you know, you know. You don't let obstacles get in the way." She said it with the confidence of someone who'd never had to choose between love and everything else in her life. Marcus wanted to argue, to explain that relationships were more complicated than force of will, but he also didn't want to turn the date into a debate about his failed relationship. "What about you?" he asked instead. "Last relationship?" 6 months ago, she said, waving her hand dismissively. "He was intimidated by my success. Typical fragile male ego stuff." The way she said it, casual, like it was a known category of human behavior, made Marcus wonder what she'd say about him to her friends next week. Would he become another story about fragile male egos? Another guy who couldn't handle her? "That sucks," he said, because he couldn't think of anything else to say. "It's fine," Vanessa said, finishing her first glass of wine. "I learned a long time ago that I'd rather be alone than settle for someone who can't match my energy." She signaled the waiter, "Could I get another glass of the Pinot Grigio? Actually, make it the Chardonnay this time. I want to try something different." Marcus watched her order another $24 glass of wine and felt something solidify in his chest. This wasn't a date. This was a performance, and he was the audience member who paid for a ticket he couldn't afford. The conversation continued, but Marcus found himself only half present, his mind running calculations. The charcuterie board, $36. The burrata, $18. Her salad, $16. Her fish, $58. 2 glasses of wine, $48. His steak, $45. His beer, $8. $229 before tax and tip. And she wasn't slowing down. "Oh my God," Vanessa said, flagging the waiter again. "Do you guys have that chocolate lava cake with the vanilla bean ice cream?" "We do," the waiter said, smiling. "Perfect. We'll take one. Actually, you know what? Make it 2. And can you do the creme brulee as well? I can't decide, and life's too short not to try everything." Marcus felt his face freeze into something resembling a smile. "That's a lot of dessert." "We can take it to go if we don't finish, but honestly, I've been so good about my diet this week, I deserve this." 3 desserts, another $50 probably. He should have said something then. Should have been honest. "Hey, this is getting pretty expensive. Can we maybe just split one dessert?" It was a reasonable thing to ask, a normal thing. But he didn't. Because somewhere in his head, that voice was still whispering that saying anything would make him the cheap guy, the insecure guy, the guy who couldn't handle a successful woman. So he smiled and nodded and watched her order enough sugar to feed a small party. The waiter brought the desserts. All 3 of them. Vanessa took a photo of the arrangement, holding her phone at various angles to get the perfect shot for what Marcus assumed was Instagram. "This is going to get so many likes. My followers love food porn." She took exactly 2 bites of the lava cake, 1 bite of the creme brulee, and ignored the second cake entirely. "I'm so full," she announced, pushing the plates away. But that was amazing. Marcus stared at the barely touched desserts and felt something close to rage building in his chest. $200 worth of food, and she'd treated it like a photo op. The waiter appeared with the check, placing the black folder discreetly near Marcus's elbow. Standard procedure. The guy who made the reservation usually paid. He opened it, already knowing what he'd find, but still feeling the impact when he saw the number. $347.82. $347.82 for one dinner, with a woman he'd known for exactly 2 hours. That's when Vanessa made her move. "Oh my God," she said, her hand flying to her purse with perfect timing. "Marcus, I'm so embarrassed." He looked up, already knowing what was coming, but hoping somehow he was wrong. "I completely forgot my wallet. Can you believe it? I literally grabbed the wrong bag when I left the office." She laughed, bright and apologetic. "I'm such a disaster sometimes." And there it was. Marcus felt time slow down in that weird way it does when you're watching something terrible happen and can't stop it. He saw the whole play in crystal clarity: the expensive restaurant suggestion, the aggressive ordering, the second glass of wine, the 3 desserts she barely touched. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was strategy. "You forgot your wallet," he said slowly. "I know, I'm the worst." She reached across the table, touching his hand. "I promise, I'll Venmo you tomorrow. What's your Venmo?" No, she wouldn't. Marcus knew with absolute certainty that she would not Venmo him tomorrow. She'd probably text him once, maybe twice, with some excuse about her app being glitchy or her bank account being weird. Then she'd ghost, and he'd be out $347.82. He had 2 choices. He could call her out right now, make a scene, demand she find some way to pay her share, or he could pay the bill and the date and chalk it up to an expensive lesson about trusting his instincts. The second option was easier, safer, less confrontational, but Marcus was done being safe. "That's crazy," he said, keeping his voice pleasant. "What are the odds, right?" Vanessa's face relaxed, relief flooding her features. "I know, right? Thank you so much for understanding. You're amazing." "No problem," Marcus said, pulling out his wallet. "But actually, I have an idea." He signaled the waiter, who appeared instantly with that service industry sixth sense for tension. "Hey man, could you split this check for us? Separate bills." The waiter glanced between them, reading the room like a pro. "Of course, just give me one moment." Wait," she said, her smile faltering. "I told you I don't have my wallet." "Right," Marcus said, calmly, "but the restaurant might be able to take a credit card number over the phone. Or you could check if Apple Pay works. I'm sure we can figure something out." Her face had gone from apologetic to confused to something harder, calculating. "Marcus, I told you I would pay you back." "I know," he said, keeping his tone friendly. "But tomorrow's Friday, and I actually have some bills hitting my account. It would just be easier if we could settle up tonight." The waiter returned with 2 separate checks, placing them carefully on the table. Marcus was $53 plus tax and tip, his steak and beer. Vanessa's was the rest. She stared at it like it was a dead animal on the table. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice dropping from apologetic to cold. "I told you I forgot my wallet." "And I heard you, but I'm sure we can work something out. Do you have Apple Pay?" "That's not the point. So you do have your phone, which means you can pay with that." Her jaw tightened. For a moment, Marcus thought she might actually walk out, leave him with both bills and a story to tell. But he could see her doing the math. Walking out would mean admitting the con, making a scene, potentially getting the restaurant involved. Better to pay and maintain the fiction. "Fine," she said, reaching into her purse. The phone emerged, along with surprise. A card holder with at least 3 credit cards visible. "Found your wallet," he said. She shot him a look that could have melted steel. "I must have put it in this bag without thinking. Lucky break." They paid separately. Vanessa didn't say a word as she tapped her phone against the card reader, her expression tight with barely suppressed rage. Marcus tipped his waiter generously, feeling lighter than he had all night, despite the $53 he'd never get back for his portion. Outside the restaurant, Vanessa turned to him, and her face had rearranged itself one more time, now trying for wounded dignity. "I can't believe you embarrassed me like that." Marcus looked at her, really looked at her, and saw past the beauty to the machinery underneath. The careful calculations, the practice moves, the entire routine she'd run on God knows how many guys. "Vanessa," he said, calmly, "you ordered $300 worth of food and conveniently forgot your wallet. I didn't embarrass you. You embarrassed yourself." "I told you I would pay you back." "No, you wouldn't have. We both know that. This was always the plan." Her face flickered through several expressions before settling on contemptuous. "You know what your problem is, Marcus? You're cheap and insecure, and you're going to die alone because you can't handle a woman who knows her worth." "Maybe," Marcus said, "but at least I'll die with my integrity and my bank account intact." She stared at him for a long moment, maybe waiting for him to apologize, to back down, to prove her narrative right. When he didn't, she turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the sidewalk. Marcus watched her go, then pulled out his phone and opened his dating apps. One by one, he deleted every conversation he hadn't met in person yet, every match that had suggested expensive restaurants for first dates, every woman whose profile mentioned loving the finer things in life. Then he deleted the apps entirely. The Uber ride home gave Marcus time to think. Not about Vanessa, she was already fading into the category of dodged bullet, but about how he'd gotten there in the first place. He'd seen the red flags. That first conversation when she'd pushed back against drinks, implying that anything less than dinner meant he wasn't serious. The insistence on merchant and trade instead of somewhere more casual. The way she'd framed every reasonable objection as evidence of his inadequacy. And he'd ignored it all because he was lonely, and she was beautiful, and some part of him believed that successful, attractive women were supposed to be high maintenance. That if he couldn't afford to keep up with her lifestyle, the problem was him, not her manipulation. His phone buzzed. A text from Jake. "How'd the date go?" Marcus typed back, $300 disaster. She forgot her wallet. 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, "Holy shit, did you make her pay?" Marcus typed back, "Forced a split check. She was pissed." Fucking legend. Welcome to the club, brother. Marcus stared at that last line. Welcome to the club. Like there was an entire fraternity of men who'd been through this exact same scam. All of them too embarrassed or too conditioned to call it out. How many times had Vanessa pulled this? How many guys had paid her bill without question, convincing themselves that this was just how dating worked now? That expensive tastes and forgotten wallets were the price of admission for a shot at a beautiful woman. And more importantly, how many women were out there doing the same thing, knowing that male pride and social conditioning would keep most guys from making a scene? The thought made him angry, but not at Vanessa, not really. She was just working the system, exploiting the gaps between how people wanted to appear and how they actually felt. Every guy who'd paid her bill without question had reinforced the behavior, taught her the con worked. Marcus had almost been one of them. His phone buzzed again, different number this time. "Hey, it's Vanessa.
I just wanted to say I'm sorry about tonight. I was having a rough day and I think I took it out on you. Would you want to give this another shot? Somewhere more casual this time. My treat." He read the message 3 times, looking for sincerity and finding only desperation. She'd realized he wasn't going to be the guy who called her the next day, wasn't going to be the backup plan or the ego stroke. So now came the reconciliation attempt, the promise of a different dynamic. But the word choice gave her away. Somewhere more casual this time, and my treat, this time, implying that the expensive restaurant and her convenient amnesia had been an aberration, not the whole point. He deleted the message without responding. Another text came through, this time from a number he didn't recognize. "Hi, it's Sophie, Jake's friend. He said you might be interested in getting coffee sometime. No pressure, but I'm free this weekend if you want to meet up." Coffee. Not dinner. Not a 3-course meal at a place where appetizers cost $40. Just coffee. The kind of first date where you could actually talk without the pressure of a 3-figure bill looming over every conversation. Marcus smiled and typed back, "Coffee sounds perfect. Saturday afternoon? Great. There's a place near me that does amazing pour-overs. Very casual, like $6 a cup." $6 a cup. She'd specified the price, letting him know upfront what the expectation was. No games, no hidden costs, no tests of his willingness to prove himself through spending. "See you Saturday," he wrote back. The Uber pulled up to his building. Marcus tipped the driver well. Probably should have saved the money after tonight's disaster, but he believed in taking care of people who did their jobs honestly, and headed up to his apartment. Inside, he looked at the place with fresh eyes. It was nice. Not fancy, but nice. The kind of space that represented actual achievement. Mortgage payments made on time. Furniture he'd saved up for. A life built through work rather than manipulation. His phone buzzed. Vanessa again. "Fine, fuck you then. I was doing you a favor even giving you a chance. Good luck finding someone as good as me." Marcus smiled and blocked the number. Then he opened his laptop and did something he'd been thinking about for weeks, but never quite had the motivation to execute. He wrote an honest review of Merchant and Trade on Google. Not about the food, which had been excellent, but about his experience. Great restaurant, but be warned, apparently popular with people who use expensive venues to scam their dates. Restaurant staff was professional and helpful when I asked to split the check. 5 stars for the food and service, 0 stars for the clientele using it as a hunting ground. It was petty, maybe even a little unfair to the restaurant, but Marcus felt like future Marks deserved a warning. He posted it and closed the laptop. Tomorrow he'd wake up, go to work, continue living his life with $347.82 less than he'd planned. It stung, but not as much as realizing he'd almost fallen for it would have stung. Because here's what he'd learned tonight. The price of the meal didn't matter. The real cost was believing that love or attraction or even just basic decency could be purchased with expensive dinners and tolerance for bad behavior. Vanessa had tried to sell him a fantasy, that if he just paid enough, spent enough, proved himself enough, he might be worthy of her attention. Marcus had declined to buy, and standing in his apartment, looking at his reflection in the darkened window, he felt like he'd won something more valuable than any date could have provided. He'd won himself back.
Saturday came faster than Marcus expected. He'd spent Friday at work distracted, his mind returning periodically to that moment at the restaurant when he'd asked the waiter to split the check. The look on Vanessa's face, shock, then rage, then calculation, had been worth every penny of his steak dinner. By Friday night, his story had spread through his friend group. Jake had apparently shared it with everyone, and Marcus's phone had blown up with messages ranging from, "Holy shit, she actually said she forgot her wallet," to, "Dude, I think I went out with her friend last year." That last message had come from his buddy Tyler, along with a screenshot of a different woman's dating profile. Looking for a gentleman who knows how to treat a lady right. If you can't handle me at my most expensive, you don't deserve me at my most dressed. Marcus had stared at that bio for a solid minute, marveling at how brazen it was. At least this one was honest about her intentions. Now it was Saturday afternoon, and he was walking into Brew and Bloom, a coffee shop in a neighborhood he didn't usually visit. The place was exactly as Sophie had described. Casual, indie, the kind of spot where people actually read books instead of just posing with them for Instagram. Sophie was already there, sitting by the window with 2 cups in front of her. She stood when she saw him, and Marcus's first thought was, she looks exactly like her photos. Not in a disappointing way, in a refreshing way. No strategic angles or filters, just a woman who looked like herself. "Marcus?" she said, smiling. "I got here early and couldn't resist ordering. I hope that's okay. I got you a pour-her. Jake said you're a coffee snob." "I'm going to kill Jake," Marcus said, but he was smiling. "And thank you. How much do I owe you?" $6.50, but you can get the next round if this goes well. If this goes well. Not assuming, not presuming. Just honest about the possibility that they might not click, and that was fine too. They sat, and for the first few minutes made the usual small talk. Work, where they grew up, how they knew Jake. Sophie was a graphic designer, freelance mostly, which meant she had the kind of schedule flexibility that both thrilled and terrified her. "Some days I don't talk to another human until 6 p.m. It's either paradise or a prison, depending on my mood." "I can't imagine that. I'm in an office with 40 people. Sometimes I'd kill for silence." "Want to trade?" "Tempting, but I don't think I can draw stick figures, let alone actual design work." She laughed. Genuine, not performative. Stick figures are underrated, very avant-garde. The conversation flowed easily, without the pressure or performance of his date with Vanessa. Sophie asked about his engineering work with real curiosity, not the calculated interest of someone trying to assess his earning potential. When she mentioned her freelance rates, she did it naturally, in the context of a story about a nightmare client, not as a flex. An hour passed, then 2. They ordered second cups of coffee. Marcus paid this time, $13 total, and didn't think twice about it. "So," Sophie said, wrapping her hands around her mug, "Jake mentioned you had a disaster date recently." Marcus winced. "He told you about that?" "He said you had to split the tech because she forgot her wallet." She made air quotes, "which is such a classic move that I'm amazed women still try it." "You've seen it before?" "My roommate used to do it," Sophie said, and her expression was pure disgust. She called it letting men be gentlemen. I called it fraud. We're not roommates anymore. Marcus felt something relax in his chest. It's crazy, right? The whole thing felt like a setup from the beginning, but I kept telling myself I was being paranoid or cheap or... "Let me guess," Sophie interrupted. "She suggested an expensive restaurant, ordered aggressively, made you feel like you'd be a terrible person if you questioned any of it?" "Are you psychic?" "No, just female, and tired of other women making dating harder for the rest of us." She leaned forward. "Here's the thing. There's a difference between someone who appreciates nice things and someone who uses nice things as a test. The first person will offer to split or take turns paying. The second person will make you feel like garbage for not bankrupting yourself on date 1. Vanessa literally said I was cheap and insecure when I called her out." "Of course she did, because if the problem is you, your inadequacy, your inability to appreciate her, then she doesn't have to examine her own behavior. My ex used to do the same thing. Every time I questioned his spending or suggested we needed to budget, he'd accuse me of not supporting his dreams or trying to control him. Took me 2 years to realize he was just bad with money and didn't want to admit it." They talked for another hour, sharing disaster date stories and relationship postmortems. Sophie had been single for 8 months after ending a 5-year relationship with someone who sounded exhausting. Not cruel, just perpetually dissatisfied, always chasing the next thing that would finally make him happy. "What about you?" she asked. Marcus told her about Jen, about the distance and the different life goals.
but also about the deeper issue. They'd stopped being partners and started being people who happened to live in the same place. We loved each other, but we didn't like each other anymore. And I think that's harder to fix than just love. Sophie nodded slowly. Yeah, that's really honest. Too honest? Is this the part where I'm supposed to pretend my ex was terrible to make myself look better? God, no, Sophie said. I'm so tired of people who trash their exes. Like, you dated them. What does it say about you that you chose someone you now claim is the worst person alive? Marcus laughed, surprised by how much he liked this woman he'd known for 3 hours. They talked until the coffee shop started putting chairs on tables, a gentle hint that they'd been there too long. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the street in gold and amber light. So, Sophie said, this was really nice. Yeah, it really was. Want to do it again? Maybe actual dinner this time? Dutch. Dutch sounds perfect. How about Tuesday? They made plans. A casual Italian place in Sophie's neighborhood. Nothing fancy, the kind of restaurant where you could actually hear each other talk. As they said goodbye, Sophie touched his arm lightly. Hey, for what it's worth, that woman who forgot her wallet, she did you a favor. She showed you exactly who she was before you wasted any more time on her. Marcus thought about Vanessa's final text, the anger and entitlement dripping from every word. Then he thought about this afternoon, about easy conversation and shared laughter and the absence of games. You're right, he said. Best $300 I never should have spent. Sophie grinned. See you Tuesday, Marcus. He watched her walk away, then pulled out his phone and texted Jake. You were right about Sophie. I owe you a beer. Jake's response came immediately. Damn right you do. And for the record, I'm officiating the wedding. It was one coffee date. Yeah, and you're already texting me about it. I know the signs, brother. Marcus smiled and pocketed his phone. Maybe Jake was right. Maybe he wasn't. But for the first time in a long time, he was excited to find out. He walked home through the cooling evening thinking about red flags and instincts and the difference between people who added value to your life and people who extracted it. Vanessa had been a $300 lesson in trusting his gut, in not confusing the price of something for its worth. And Sophie was a $13 reminder that the best things were usually simpler than you expected. His phone buzzed one last time. An unknown number. Just so you know, I found your Google review and reported it. Enjoy your legal problems. Marcus blocked the number without responding. Vanessa was still trying to manipulate him, still trying to make him feel like he'd done something wrong by refusing to be her mark. But he was done playing that game. He was done with tests disguised as dates, with people who measured worth in spending rather than substance, and the exhausting dance of trying to prove himself to someone who'd already decided he wasn't enough. $347.82. It was a lot of money for a lesson, but it was worth every penny.